I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we are talking about a book you just won't want to put down. It is called The Valley of Dragons. It is written by Pearce DeChamplain. He weaves an enthralling tale of honor, self-worth, and the challenging dichotomy between internal and external perceptions. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by buying this wonderful book, The Valley of Dragons. Pearce, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
My pleasure. I'm super excited to have you because I'm a big fan of this book. Let's start out with the big picture for the folks at home. Let's tell them what Valley of Dragons is about.
So The Valley of Dragons is a story about an advanced magical civilization that lives in this magical place called the Valley of Dragons. There's an interesting culture that has been developed because this is the only safe place in the world. Outside of this valley is chaos and turmoil. So the people inside have never wanted to leave, which causes a lot of problems. Because when you have a bunch of people that are used to one way of living, when someone challenges that idea, it can really affect a lot of people. So that brings us to our main character, Septimus, who has spent his whole life trying to make sure that people see him in the right light. But when something happens in the story that tosses him into the darkness, that wasn't even his fault. He has to fight even harder every day. And it really makes him ask the question, what matters more, how other people perceive you or how you perceive yourself? Because his own self-worth starts coming into question.
That is a tough question because how you view yourself might be completely different from how the world views you. And the way the world treats you and interacts with you is based upon their perception, not your own. So it's definitely an intriguing premise, that's for sure. What's your inspiration? Are you a big Lord of the Rings type of person or a Harry Potter person? Tell us a little bit about what you like to watch or read.
So I grew up in the woods on a tree farm in South Carolina, 25 acres of trees, no neighbors, all alone. So I had to entertain myself with all sorts of stuff. I've read everything sci-fi related from my favorites of Red Rising by Pierce Brown, all the way to the fantasy of Harry Potter. But one thing I found very interesting about all of those books is consequences were a little wishy-washy. Yeah. One of the things that I really like to tackle in my books is that every action that every character makes in this story has some kind of connective event. Nothing ever happens that just gets undone immediately by some event. So while it may be scary for some readers, you should be worried about a few of these characters.
Absolutely.
So I read sci-fi, I read fantasy, and this is a nice mix of the blend of the two, I think.
Absolutely. Have you envisioned Valley of Dragons as a series or a movie, perhaps, or a series of movies?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My friends and I, when we were talking about my book, and they often describe my scenes as movie-like, I try to do, whenever I write any action scene, discussion, political debate within it, I try to imagine not just how it would sound on the page, but how people would see each character as they do it. So I spend a lot of time in my scenes not just describing and telling what the character is doing, but the world around them as well, because I've always seen it as a movie in my head. So I'm hoping to bring the same movie to everyone else.
Well, that's great. I think that if you're going to have effective writing, it has to be very visual as well. So I think that's probably one of your secrets to writing such a great novel, such as Valley of Dragons. Now, who would play Septimus? I'm not available to play the part, unfortunately.
Oh, dang it.
I think I'm a little old.
That was my first one. I don't know about Septimus. Septimus is a very interesting character because I'd want somebody who is probably a little in the public eye. So I would want somebody who is also dealing with perhaps somebody who has not been in a lot of roles and is questioning their own worth as an actor, as somebody like that. So I would definitely want probably a kind of a new rising star, perhaps.
Right. So, yeah, like maybe a younger, less known Chris Pine or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. He seems
Someone
to
who
be
looks
my
good with
go-to
long hair.
sci-fi actor for whatever reason. I don't know what it is.
He did so well in Star Trek. So
Yeah, he did. I guess that's what it is for sure. Are there going to be more? Is this going to be a series of books, Valley of Dragons? It certainly seems like it.
it's good that you bring that up.
Yeah.
Yes, there will definitely be more because I have the book right here in my
Mhm.
hands, and it's a pretty decent sized book here.
Yeah.
Almost 400 pages. And the funny part about that is an accurate name for it would be part one. So when I was writing the book, I was doing it more for a personal project, just to see if I could do it. Because I've always had these fun ideas where I'd watch a television show and then be a little disappointed by certain choices that they made. And the final nail in the coffin, as it were, was I was a very big fan of Game of Thrones.
Mm.
And don't need to explain that one.
Yeah.
And so that one is really what made me want to start writing. So I wrote all the way through and I realized I made it to a point in my story and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a second, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to go back and look at what I've written. And I realized that I was almost 400 pages in and only about halfway done with my story.
Yeah.
So I decided to stop there and really bring it to the quality that it is now. And I'm very happy and very excited to get started on the second and possibly third one, which I have a little bit of ideas for the third one as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Who was your first reader when you were done? Who did you give the book to and say, hey, what did you think of this?
Oh, I had a couple people because there were a few folks that were reading as I wrote it. I had a friend of mine from home. Her name is Haley Bench. And I have a female protagonist that I write angles from. And it was very important to me to write women accurately because my girlfriend, she is a very wonderful woman. Her name is Caitlin. And she reads a lot of fantasy novels that are written by men. And she says that they never quite get women correctly. So I wanted to ensure that I was doing justice to everyone in the story. I never wanted anyone to feel like they couldn't find something or something didn't sound right to them. So I had tons of people, but the first one to probably read the complete book was Caitlin. And she helped me so much through the process, and she's just fantastic.
Now, in your real life, you are not a fantasy writer or a creative writer major. You're an MBA student, correct?
Yes.
So tell us about that dichotomy there.
Yeah. So growing up, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I came into school as a biology major, swapped to a computer science major, still had no real direction or focus because my head was too far into the clouds, thinking about too much fun stuff. But I always thought that writing was an interesting avenue that I could pursue. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't hurt any future family I had just trying to follow a passion. I wanted to make sure I had the strong base, which allowed me to see all these different angles and sides of people. And I got to see people who are looking for and heading towards positions of power, which, you know, in my MBA, it's all about management and dealing with politics and how to effectively improve systems that are already constructed. So I tried to use my creative background from being a kid with no neighbors in the middle of the woods who just reads books all day, and the business application of all this to try and create a world that felt creative, but also rational, that it makes sense that these characters are acting the way they do. And hopefully it'll make sense when they stop acting the way they should.
Absolutely. What was it like growing up on a tree farm? What would you say, 25 acres, was it? Or
Yes.
Was it isolating? Was it enjoyable? Would you grow up a different way if you had a choice? Are you happy you grew up that way?
If I had a different choice, I don't think I would. There were a lot of times I was sitting in my bedroom on the second floor, just staring out of my driveway, reading a book or waiting for friends and anything like that. It was a little challenging having an hour commute to get to any of my friends. And school was about 40 minutes away in the morning. So 6 a.m., get up and go. But living out there gave me so many opportunities and so many wonderful things that I would never give up. Like, for instance, I think the minimum amount of dogs I had at one time, and it still goes today, is 6.
Wow.
So my family loves Australian Shepherds, and I grew up with all sorts of exotic animals, of peacocks and tortoises. I have a 300-pound tortoise named Corona.
Wow.
And I grew up with so many lovely animals and so many lovely people and such a lovely place, it really helped me be the creative I want to be. So I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, it's nice living in a rural place like that. I actually moved to a farm after the pandemic and love it. You know, not on 25 acres, more on 10. I do have neighbors that I can see. So it's not as isolated as your world, but it's isolated enough so that it's very, very nice. Indeed. So, and it is inspirational. It does nurture that side of your brain that needs nurturing as well. Well, this is excellent. I'm glad. How long did it take you to write this book, by the way?
So it took me about a year to write it, 2 years to edit, and 3 years to get it published.
Right.
So overall, about 6. There were some delays in the process because the pandemic hit right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But I would say the rough draft of the book was finished in the first year, and it only got better with every year that I put into it. And I've learned so much from this first process that I can promise you, if you think this first book is good, the second one is going to knock your socks off.
Awesome. Awesome. What's the title of the second book? Do you have a working title right now?
Working title is Rise of the Dragon King.
Rise of the Dragon King. Love it. Perfect. People are waiting for the first movie. They'll be waiting for the second movie as well. The name of the book is The Valley of Dragons, written by Pearce DeChamplain. It is a wonderful book, an enthralling tale of honor and self-worth, and it challenges the dichotomy between internal and external perceptions. It's an amazing book. Pearce has created a unique world that you will want to stay in and enjoy for a while. Unfortunately, there's not one book, there's 2. Looking forward to both of them. Pearce, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.